Our grounds department is made up of roughly 30 plus professional landscape gardeners. We have our own mechanic, our own refuse truck driver, our own pesticide technician. We have several irrigation techs, our renovations landscape professionals, and we also have our crew of landscape gardeners who do all of the maintenance on nearly 150 acres of campus. We have 18 to 20 groundskeepers who maintain roughly 4 to 5 acres per person. We're making things look neat, tidy, kept, but keeping the natural look to nature as it should be. We don't want a formal looking landscape. We don't want our turf to look like a golf course. We just want to maintain a park-like setting in this arboretum, and we do our best to do that with seasonal routine maintenance in addition to continuous landscape enhancement projects. Many times people are moving to Panorama, and one of the reasons they move here is because they love the Arboretum, they love the landscape, the manicured grounds. Many people have their own idea of what they think the campus should look like. This is communal living, and we need people to realize we want to have a cohesive, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing look about campus. But if we were to let every resident do their own personal gardening, we would have something quite different. For instance, some people would prefer to have their shrubs pruned into balls and squares and various shapes, and we're not into that. We would like to keep our campus looking very natural, and that means selective pruning, which is a little more intensive, but it's more natural for the vegetation. As a matter of fact, there aren't any plants or shrubs that would prefer to be pruned. Everything in nature would prefer to grow just the way it would like to grow. But we have to do a certain amount of maintenance just for visibility, safety, and again, aesthetics because of how our units are located, our pathways, our roadways. So that is why we do that type of pruning. And we would prefer to do planting of native plants and/or things that do well in the Pacific Northwest, whereas some people might like to see palm trees or eucalyptus, any number of other things that may not necessarily do well in our environment. We're not just thinking about the aesthetics of how things look and how things work together, but we're thinking about plants that work in nature in our community here with everything else that we have planted. We want to plant things that are efficient for us to maintain. We want things that consume less water because of where our climate change is headed towards. And we want to plant things that won't necessarily increase the number of insects or the various funguses that start to take over our shrubs, trees, and plants. So we're keeping in mind all different sorts of things when we do our plantings here at Panorama, and we would just as soon avoid personal bed plantings. If residents would like to still have a hand in gardening, we welcome anyone who would like to help us weed throughout the weed growing season. That's one thing. But as far as actual planting and gardening, we have a wonderful pea patch located just off of Golf Club Road where residents grow any number of fruits, vegetables, flowers, you name it. It's just a spectacular place for people to garden, and people are welcome to reserve a plot over at the pea patch. Folks can also join the green team and help in maintaining our pollinator garden down by our community park, and that's a wonderful place to get a feel for planting. The other thing is we're encouraging people, rather than putting pots and plants all over in our beds that we're maintaining, we want people to only keep their container plantings on their patios and possibly their entryways and their porches. We need to avoid egress codes, and so we don't want container plantings everywhere. We need to stick with the code policies. people have done an enormous amount of containers out in the beds and/or an excessive amount of yard art, making it very encumbersome for our area gardeners, our security, and our maintenance people to be able to maneuver around the units. And also giving us an entirely different look than what we're looking for. We've realized that one of the reasons folks were doing this is because they wanted more seasonal interest. They wanted more color. They didn't just want to see our array of green foliage that we have. And so that is one of the reasons why we are introducing more and more and more perennial flowers and shrubs and plants that have seasonal interest, and also bulb planting. A lot of that went away a few years ago. We're reintroducing bulbs. We want to have a breath of fresh air in the spring with all kinds of color and fragrance all year long. Oftentimes, residents may want to plant their own things, and those aren't necessarily cohesive with what our plan is ultimately. We would just as soon that residents keep their plantings to their containers and let us maintain the beds, the turf, the common areas, the green belts. Our ultimate goal is to have pollinating plants and beautiful scented plants that draw the birds and the bees. We want to have a complete mix of foliage throughout campus. Right now, we're in the midst of summer. And so we are primarily mowing all of our turf. We're weeding, edging, pruning as needed because we've had a tremendous amount of growth this year in particular. So we'll do what's needed as we go along, but still it's somewhat seasonal. What that means is very shortly, we'll be able to stop mowing our grass as it stops growing, and then the leaves will start falling, and we'll be into primarily leaf cleanup and bed cleanup for the next 2 to 3 months. We're going to continue pruning as needed. Our primary focus is on maintaining the health of all of our thousands of trees that we have on campus. We have arborists visiting our campus nearly every week just to maintain the health, the aesthetics, and what's needed for visibility and safety issues in regards to our trees. Our area gardeners and landscapers will be primarily focused on bed cleanup and pruning of shrubs and so on at the right times. Oftentimes, residents will want us to go out and prune something because they think it's too large, it's blocking a window, it's touching other shrubs or trees. And we ask that residents don't do any of that pruning because we are well aware of the correct times of when it's best to prune shrubs and trees and plants. And so we don't want somebody to go out there and do some aggressive pruning, whereas they may be taking away all of the blossoms or blooms that are to follow. So we want to prune at the correct times of year, even though traditionally most things do get pruned and cut back in the fall and or early spring. We know that most folks move into Panorama because they are retired and they're ready to not do all of the maintenance that it takes to maintain your yard, your roof, your hardscape, whatever the case may be. Not only are we tending to the turf, the plants, the trees, we're taking care of your hardscape, which includes continuous cleaning in the form of blowing and or pressure washing. We're also taking care of your roofs and gutters, which most people when they're retired have had enough of that type of work. We don't want people up on ladders cleaning their own gutters and or their roofs. We have a crew of people who are certified based on OSHA standards with ropes and harnesses. Every groundsperson receives annual training on ropes, harnesses, and ladders. And so we want you to leave that to us. In addition to cleaning your roofs and gutters, we also do moss control. So we know some people have issues when they start to see clumps of moss on the roof. Well, we do too. We don't want our employees to be up on the roof and slip and fall. We don't want the moss to start decaying, the composition shingles and so on. And so we do annual rotational moss treatment on every roof in Panorama. We want to do things that are conducive not only for our aesthetics and our maintenance, but for the habitat in general. We do have a method to our madness in the way we do our maintenance. And one of those items is leaving mulch in the beds. We don't have a problem leaving a fair amount of leaf mulch, a fair amount of needles and other debris because we believe in sustainable practices. We don't want people to feel that they need to go out and rake and clean and tidy up their beds. When we leave that leaf mulch, we're providing habitat for little critters, even down to little nematodes, beetles, birds and the bees, little rabbits and mice and squirrels. There's a reason why nature drops its leaves and needles throughout the year. So we don't want to take everything away. We're looking to have a very natural, aesthetically pleasing park-like setting. At some point in time, because we have so many trees and shrubs on campus, we're going to go ahead and haul away some of that debris, some of that mulch, and we will in turn have that recycled into compost. In addition to having our arborists prune throughout campus all year long, we're now recycling all of the wood chips from all of the debris that our arborists cut. We're in the mode now of removing sod wherever we can, wherever it's not growing very well, because it's too shaded, because it's too wet, because there's too much hard pack. Whatever the case may be, if our grass isn't growing well, we would just as soon remove it and replace it with wood chips and or other mulch and shade plantings so that we still have a beautiful setting and we're still providing habitat for the wildlife. Another thing we're doing along those lines to be more sustainable is reducing the amount of chemical pesticides and herbicides that we use on campus. So rather than in the past where Roundup, Crossbow, Sedgehammer, any number of other chemical herbicides have been used to help us control our weeds, we're using vinegar, oil, and water. And we have every landscape gardener carrying a container of that in their vehicles at all times now. So with that, we're seeing great results. We really are, because we don't have every landscape gardener licensed to apply herbicide on campus. We have maybe a third of our crew is licensed, and many people just are very much against any chemical herbicides. And as being good stewards of the earth, we would love to not use any of the harsh chemicals with glyphosate and other harsh things that are in them. And so we're using vinegar, oil, and water and finding great results. We're also now using propane torch burners to reduce the amount of weed growth in the cracks in the sidewalks, on your driveways, in the street. And we're going to continue that practice. We've just recently started it and we feel it's been very successful this year. So it's something we're going to continue in our efforts to reduce any amount of herbicide that we'd use. We want to do rotational mowing as much as possible, and that means rather than, as has been done in the past, mowing the entire campus every single week, we would like to rotate and mow every other week when it's conducive to do so. When the grass is growing too tall, we cannot do that. We need to mow on a continuous basis. But if we can even eliminate a few weeks out of each season of mowing, that is a tremendous amount of resources we're saving. It's a tremendous amount of time now that we've freed up for our landscape gardeners to do other gardening rather than being on a mower. We've reduced the amount of hours of listening to noise pollution in the area. And by doing this, we're also consuming nearly 50% less water than we ever have before because we're letting the grass grow longer. Another thing we're doing in the grounds department, which I'm very excited about, and it's an effort on our part to be more sustainable at Panorama, we're switching from gas-powered equipment and tools to electric tools. So far in our repertoire, we have an electric mower, several electric line trimmers, blowers, pressure washers, and hedge trimmers. And we'll continue to add to that list as we go. One of our vehicles we use, called a carry-all, is actually electric powered. So at some point in time, we're hoping that some of our 48 to our 60-inch zero-turn mowers, at some point in time, we may be able to get those battery operated as well, which we know residents will love. We know that people have an issue with how noisy our big mowers are, and we need those big mowers. We have 37 acres of turf to mow each week. And in order to get that done, we need our 52, 60-inch mowers and so on. But we're hoping that eventually we'll get battery-operated mowers, which will be far less noisy than what we have right now and will not be consuming gasoline and oil. Even the maintenance on all of this battery-operated equipment is far less than what we have with our other mechanical tools. We want people to just sit back, relax, and enjoy your retirement and let us do the hard work.